Yuval David, filmmaker, director, actor, and activist, is joining us from Washington. Thanks so much, Yuval, for joining us.
Thank you for having me on your show.
So let's talk Law and Order for 1 second. They've always been really good about finding something that's in the headlines and ripping it from the headlines and creating something out of it. How do you explain a story of October the 7th? I mean, I don't even know. I can't imagine a writer's room that would actually believe what happened.
Well, maybe you can't imagine a writer's room that's taking what happened because you're currently in Israel. In the United States, people aren't living in the depth of the traumas of October 7th as you are in Israel. Having just recently returned from Israel, I experienced that and came back to the United States to see the difference. A writer's room of Law and Order does something that it's known for. It's taking things from the headlines and turning it into episodes. It's a very compelling thing. It's what they've done. To now see that they're even using October 7th as storylines, I mean, to me, it's disturbing, but it's also what they do. What we do see, though, is that they have painted the pro-Palestinian protesters as dangerous agitators. And maybe that was a directorial choice. Maybe that was Dick Wolf who did that, the series creator. So we're seeing what they saw as a fair representation of all of the complexities surrounding October 7th.
Why do you use quotation marks?
I use quotation marks because we're also seeing people talk about how complex this issue is. And I don't think that there is any complexity with completely condemning terrorism. There should be no complexity there. That's why I use quotation marks.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Yuval, I totally get it. I understand that. I just, I think many of the viewers at home don't know that there's an Israeli actress on Law and Order. There's also whose name is Adelia Halevi. There's also Ariel Sachel, who I know from Broadway, whose father is Yemenite Israeli. I wonder, is it easy? You know this world better than most people do. I know a little bit of that world in terms of like the writer's room. Are they able to understand the complexity? Like you said, give a fair representation. Is the writer's room understanding how to deal with this?
Well, I wasn't in the writer's room, so it's hard for me to say what their conversations were like. What we do know is the outcome. We see this show where they painted the characters of the pro-Palestinian agitators, the people who ultimately committed a murder, and painted them in a negative light. But they also showed that there was this conversation back and forth about who is in the right and who is in the wrong, and what is freedom of speech and what is freedom of expression. Although I'm sorry if I'm giving a spoiler alert, at the very end of the show, they also had a moment where a pro-Israel protester ultimately pulled a gun on police. So they tried to make it somehow balanced and even. As we've seen with the protests happening in the United States, the pro-Israel protests and demonstrations have not been dangerous, at least not based on actions that are taken by the pro-Israel protesters and demonstrators. We have seen the pro-Palestinian protests being quite dangerous, including one just a month and a half ago where a Jewish man was killed by being hit in the face with a megaphone.
Yeah, that's what I want to get to next in terms of what does Hollywood see and what does Hollywood really make a difference. I want to bring up
which is an important question. I mean, I'm part of Hollywood groups of actors and writers and agents and directors and producers, proud Jewish people talking about what do we do with the problem in Hollywood? Because we're still facing that massive silent majority who got up and spoke up and created social media posts about so many other social and global issues, but they've been completely silent about what has transpired on October 7th and since October 7th, where people are silent about this global rise in anti-Semitism. It is a huge problem that we're facing in Hollywood. And on the other side, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Please, go ahead.
And on the other side, there are people who are posting against Israel, against Zionism as a mask for anti-Semitism, because hashtag Free Palestine is a much more popular and much cooler hashtag on social media.
Yeah, and I mean, let's take an example. The Sundance Film Festival, where a lot of the Hollywood power brokers are right now. There was some of the hostage families were there to show the people in Hollywood that they lived a horror movie. You can't write a horror movie like they lived. And there were pro-Palestinian protesters out front, and they disrupted almost every single event that occurred at Sundance. And they got the headlines.
Yeah, they got the headlines because the headlines go for what is sensational. That's what so much of the entertainment news does. That's so much of what media does. Where is the sensational story? So they got a lot of headlines, and they were disruptors, and they were doing things that are cold-hearted and rude. You do not go up to the families of victims and yell and hurl epithets at them. You do not go to the families of people who are hostages and who were murdered and who were victimized, tortured, and raped, and mistreat them. It is a complete example of the lack of respect and the lack of humanity that these pro-Palestinian, I'm using my quotation marks again, the pro-Palestinian protesters show. I don't believe that they're pro-Palestinian. I think that they're anti-Israel, they're anti-Zionist, they're anti-Jewish. They are more anti than pro. And we're seeing these demonstrations and protests, so oftentimes turning into riots across the United States and Canada. The fact that it's happening right now in Park City, a place that I love to go and ski, not just go for the film festival, it's just embarrassing. Nowhere is safe.
Yuval David, thanks so much for joining us.